A city of more than 5 million people, desolate yet again, the fourth time in 15 months. But this time Melbourne's lockdown was sparked by an outbreak in hotel quarantine more than 700 kilometres away. The Playford Hotel in Adelaide is ground zero.
As soon as you get in, you go over to SAPOL and SAPOL give you a briefing.
Every time the door opens, you have to have a mask on, absolutely no questions whatsoever about that.
Chris Caminiti checked into the Playford Hotel last week.
They're very strict about it. When you open the door, put a mask on. When you open a door, because I'm on a corner here, so I'm at the end and right next to me is another room. So literally, if I open my door and he opened his door next door and we're getting our food at the same time, we would be within like an arm's distance of each other.
Despite her hotel being at the centre of this latest outbreak, she doesn't feel concerned.
I was more at risk on the plane on the way in. I mean, it's been amazing. I kind of think that I hit the quarantine jackpot with the room.
But it's the invisible threat of airborne transmission looming inside this hotel and many others that has experts worried.
Victoria has been plunged into a state of lockdown due to something that happened in South Australia. So arguably, airborne transmission wasn't given the necessary attention that it deserved in that state.
In a report released last week, SA Health confirmed airborne transmission was the likely cause of the virus spreading. An investigation found an infected guest known as Case B opened his door to collect his meal on May 3. 18 seconds later, Case A in a neighbouring room did the same. The next day, Case A returned home to Melbourne, testing positive for COVID a week later.
Whilst the ventilation, when we reviewed it, was absolutely up to standard, it may be that there was less change of air because of being at the end of a corridor.
So we're going to use this smoke to represent airborne transmission.
As an occupational hygienist, Kate Cole argues if ventilation inside the hotel had been properly reviewed, airborne transmission would have never occurred in the first place.
So when we open the door, we see that smoke escapes, just like aerosols and airborne transmission. It'll come into a corridor, it will sit there and it'll accumulate. And then when we go to open another door, that air will mix and go into that space as well.
In a statement, SA Health confirmed it's only engaged a heating, ventilation and air conditioning specialist, not a certified occupational hygienist or ventilation engineer.
South Australia Health and indeed all states and territories need to make sure that they're engaging the right level of expertise to ensure that hotel quarantine is fit for purpose. Not every hotel is going to be suitable.
It's the second time in 6 months South Australia has likely had a case of airborne transmission. Perth's most recent outbreak in April was also sparked this way. The WA government had hired an occupational hygienist a month earlier, and he warned the ventilation systems at 3 hotels were high risk. They've now all been dropped from the program. In Queensland, an investigation into the Grand Chancellor outbreak in January found a cleaner most likely caught the virus through indirect contact.
So with the exception of Howard Springs and the Northern Territory, I think airborne transmission has been implicated in almost every outbreak in hotel quarantine across every other state in Australia.
More than a year into the pandemic, and the World Health Organization has now formally recognised that COVID-19 is airborne. It's a complete backflip on its advice from last year. In Australia, some federal health advisors also denied the risk at first.
COVID-19 is not an airborne pathogen.
As recently as March, a letter signed by more than 200 experts called on the Commonwealth Government to take action on airborne transmission and to emphasise the risk to the public. This was the response.
Based on the expert medical advice received, the government understands there is little clinical or epidemiological evidence of regular airborne transmission.
Federal health authorities have recently said there's never been a question that aerosols play a part in COVID transmission.
There is airborne transmission. I don't know how much clearer I can say it. I keep being asked this question.
Australia's health guidance on aerosol spread hasn't been updated since the WHO released its new advice last month.
I think the first useful thing that the federal government could do is to make an unambiguous acknowledgement that indeed in those indoor poorly ventilated settings, airborne transmission is a very important way that the virus spreads.
For most states, the priority is finding alternatives to hotels as quarantine facilities like Howard Springs, which hasn't recorded a single outbreak.
Hotels were not meant to be this line of defence against an infectious disease.
They were never built to be quarantine facilities, but we've repurposed them and we're using them that way because we have to. And that's because the Commonwealth won't use their facilities.
If we had an alternative to hotel for this particular variant of concern, we would not be here today.
At this stage, Victoria is the only state pushing on with its proposal for a purpose-built quarantine facility.
You know, even if we were using Howard Springs type facilities for everybody, there would still be a risk of transmission from within those quarantine facilities. You know, so there's a level of tolerance that we've got to sort of develop around this.
Former New South Wales Chief Health Officer Professor Andrew Wilson warns even with purpose-built facilities, there'll still be outbreaks to come for a long time yet.
Until we have a very high level of immunisation in our community, we may still face further shutdowns.
But epidemiologist Michael Toole argues the cost of doing nothing at all is proving all too damaging.
What I suggest to get things moving is have a couple of economists look at the cost of these lockdowns and the subsequent border closures. If the economists can prove that not taking action actually causes more economic damage, then the government may be more motivated to make an investment in these facilities.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.